Everyone, and welcome to the Del Norte Solid Waste Management Authority meeting for Tuesday, August 27th. We'll call the meeting to order, and we will start off with public comment, and any member of the public may address well, before we start with public comment, I'll have Mr. Ward take roll call.
Commissioner Sullivan? Here. Commissioner Hawley?
Here.
Commissioner Wilson? Here. Commissioner Gitlin?
Here.
Chair Nia?
Here, thank you. Now we'll start with public comment, and any member of the public may address the Solid Waste Authority on any matter on or off the agenda. After receiving recognition from the chair, please give your name and address for the records. Comments are limited to 3 minutes. Any public comment? Yes, 3 meetings, I hope not. Come on.
Hi, I'm Elizabeth Henry. I'm a county resident, and I'm here to speak on the obvious issue of the director of the Del Norte Solid Waste Authority. As you can imagine, I am dismayed and disappointed about the forced resignation / retirement of the director, and especially because he was given only 24 hours notice. It's difficult to understand, and it leaves the impression, it does with me and other community members that I've heard, that he has something to do with the missing money, even though you stated over and over that he does not. But why else would you dismiss a 20-year employee where you gave him a very positive evaluation just, I think, last fall, and there seemed to be no indication that he was going to be let go. In my opinion, if there is missing money and if it stretches over more than 1 year, I think the people you should be looking at and possibly firing is your auditors, the company that does your audits. How can they give you an audit and not be able to point out where this mistake or whatever came from? I just don't understand. And I think if you want to go ahead and have the community feel some trust in what's going on, I think you need to look at a new company. I understand they do the whole county. You probably get a good deal, but I don't think that's a good deal. And the other thing that I'm very concerned about is the hiring of an interim director. I checked with personnel. There's no position advertised yet. I hope you will advertise it when it comes up. There are many of us who would like to know what that position is. Some of us might like to apply. We'd like to know what the job duties will be and the salary. And, you know, I'll say frankly, I and other concerned community members need to be assured that this is not an interim director who's being hired to take the agency apart from the inside out. And I have to say, with what's been happening with the discussion about doing exactly that, that's the feeling that's very strong in the community. And you know what it does? It diminishes the level of trust in this board and the commissioners. And I hope you'll work really hard to bring that back. But I think current events have really affected how the community feels about this particular board. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Any other public comment? Seeing none, we'll close public comment, and I'll note that, oh, I'm sorry, come on up. Sorry.
Didn't look carefully enough.
Okay.
I'm Donna Thompson, and I have a comment about also the transfer station particularly. I heard that there'd been a suggestion that people who take self-haul and so on to the transfer station perhaps would be asked to pay only with credit card and not with cash or a check. Is that right?
That'll be coming up in our agenda.
Yeah, so is this good to talk about now, or should I wait?
You might want to wait till it comes up.
Okay.
That'd be good.
But I will say that the employees there are really, really great people. And I'm also very concerned about the firing or forced retirement of Kevin Hendricks. So.
Thank you. Any other public comment? Okay, seeing none, I'll close public comment. And I'll just note that the criminal investigation is going on, and so we will let the law enforcement handle the investigation of the theft of money and not jump to any conclusions. And I think the community knows that. So we'll move on with the next item. The next item on our agenda is our consent calendar, and that's the approval of the minutes for July 23rd, July 26th, July 31st, August 6th, and August 15th. Is there a motion for approval?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Moved and second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That passes unanimously. That's the end of the consent calendar. Let's move on to the Director and Treasurer's report, and we'll start with the Acting Director's report. Mr. Ward?
Thank you, Chair Ania. So I broke with tradition a little bit, and on this new director's report, I gave you a written report. So I will go over some of the highlights of that. Authority Director Hendrick retired on the 24th of July, just after our previous meeting. I'm just going through highlights, so I will not be reading this word for word. Landfill vegetation maintenance with Alder Camp crew and the Fire Safe Council and equipment and assistance from the County Engineering Department went on 29th of July through the 5th of August. We sponsored the county fair, and thanks to assistance from volunteers, we were able to complete that outreach, only missing a couple of shifts. We did complete the electronic annual report for 2012, and that's included later in the agenda. As acting director, I did approve the waiving of fees for the disposal of materials from the Del Norte County Fair and a cleanup on Iowa Street. Historically, this board has approved with advance request waiving of the fees of disposal for the county fair, and they didn't get their request in on time, but because this was immediately after the fair and the decision needed to be made before the next meeting, and because the board had previously approved it, I went ahead and did it. Also, I'd like to thank Wes White of Hambro, who helped with cleanup on Iowa Street. Again, with staffing difficulties, I just didn't have time to go out there and supervise that cleanup, but we were all interested in getting that cleanup done, in part because it's nearby where the transfer station is and is an area where people do dump illegally. So I'd like to thank Wes for that. On the 22nd of August, I met with Chair Ania and reviewed a list of activities that we have not been able to address because of staff shortages. Obviously, we try to not let any of those things that are slipping be critical issues, so we did juggle to try to make sure that we're taking care of the central bits of business, but there are some things that are not happening. And so during the period, a major success is that all of our facilities were open during our posted hours and all the shifts were covered, with the exception of the Gaskia facility, which was closed on the 3rd of August due to excessive smoke. With several volunteers, we were able to staff the county fair booth, as I mentioned. But due to the current staffing challenges, I do recommend later in the meeting that we begin a process immediately to hire a temporary employee to be hired and trained as a refuse site attendant. We also need to update that job description, but because I don't want to delay this process at all, I'd like to go ahead and get approval to start recruiting for that position and then begin the process to revise the job description. So following the retirement of Director Kevin Hendrick, Authority Treasurer Rich Taylor agreed to help with the oversight of the fiscal administration of the Solid Waste Authority. And the past month, we have initiated 2 procedural changes with regards to how checks are processed. So the first pertains to the way that checks with insufficient funds are handled, and the procedure agreed to by the County Auditor Clinton Shad and County Treasurer Don Langston and Authority Treasurer Rich Taylor is attached to this report. And the second procedure was implemented to address checks that are incomplete or completed in a way that prevents those checks from being cashed at the bank. So we established a new process so that all of the rest of the deposits for that day are not held up because of an incomplete check. Additional concerns, authority staff, all of us are eager to have a complete investigation into the funds that are unaccounted for. Detective Barber of the Del Norte County Sheriff's Office has secured the receipts and paper records stored at the Del Norte County Transfer Station and has interviewed at least one authority employee as part of his investigation, which continues. As acting director, I remain concerned that apart from the 2 changes in how checks are processed, I have not received specific recommendations as to what changes should be implemented to improve control and oversight of our accounting systems. Nor have I received word that these are the only changes to be implemented. I will continue to work with Treasurer Rich Taylor, County Auditor, and County Treasurer Smith and Newell, and the authority accounting staff to improve these systems. My concern is that the authority uses the services of external auditors to review our procedures and suggest improvements. And my understanding is that all recommendations by Smith & Newell and these other auditing firms have been addressed prior to the discovery and verification of the funds unaccounted for. So to the extent possible, without impacting the ongoing investigation, I will continue to report when we change procedures to better assure the public that our accounting processes have been improved to address these concerns. So in the coming month, I anticipate that we will continue to do outreach, permitting, and staffing for the annual Household Hazardous Waste event, which is coming up on from 9 to 2 at the Del Norte County Transfer Station. That is the day to bring in all of the hazardous waste that we don't receive every day. Every day at the transfer station we receive recyclable household hazardous waste. So that includes used motor oil filters, antifreeze, non-aerosol latex paint, residential fluorescent tubes, television sets, and all batteries. So all of those are taken free every day. If that's what you have, the 21st is not the day for you because we take those materials every day. However, if you've got solvents, cleaners, pesticides, herbicides, poisons, pool chemicals, photographic chemicals, the 21st is the only day during the year that we can take those materials. Contaminated motor oil, say you blew a head gasket, you got oil and antifreeze mixed up together, that's the day for you. So we're planning on doing that. We will be doing quarterly landfill gas monitoring at the Crescent City landfill. We'll be inspecting our certified oil centers in the county. And we're hoping that the 2 investigation wells that are planned for the Crescent City landfill will be installed in the coming month, but we don't yet have dates set for those. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Yeah, Mr. Orr, one of the things that someone had asked me, has asked me a couple different times, and I've just forgotten to ask, but what about cooking oil?
We do take cooking oil, fats, and greases every day, but it's not a hazardous material.
Okay.
But it's unusual in that we don't take most liquids, but because we were able to work out a special deal with the local rendering company, we do take
Okay.
those every day, no special trip required.
Okay.
And the hazardous waste roundup is once a year now. For a time, it was twice a year. Is that-
We did try to do it twice a year under a grant, and that grant has expired.
Thank you.
I had a comment on your customer cash shortage form. I forgot to bring this up a little bit earlier. I just was noting that you asked for the vehicle license and the license, person's driver's license number, but I thought that it would be handy if you could write on there the vehicle type. It doesn't have, you know, if it's a minivan or a truck, or so just to help to more easily identify if that person comes
You're
back
right.
again and they've left a NSF check or something, it'd be easier to identify them by vehicle type.
Make and model. You're right. Thank you.
And one other point I wanted to talk about, and I think we can talk about during the discussion on 5.2, is this new procedure on NSF checks. I'm getting different numbers as to how many there are. I know the problem is not as pronounced as it was a year ago. So I'll talk about this with you during the discussion on 5.2.
Okay.
Any other comments on the director's reports? Any public comment on the director's reports? Yes.
Andrea Wadsworth. I just want to make sure that when the customers come into the transfer station, that the batteries have to be taped on the terminal. So that wasn't mentioned. So being a gate attendant, I was going through the things and I just thought that on the record, and the commercial people have to pay for their fluorescent tubes, and it's on the rate sheet, and residential, it's 9. And if you bring in 10, you pay for all 10. So we don't want you storing the fluorescents at home.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Any other comments? Okay, we'll accept the director's report. We'll go on to the treasurer and controller's report. Mr. Taylor?
Report here, the yellow one, which is Norm Newell, Smith & Newell.
You gotta speak in the microphone, right?
Norm Newell of Smith & Newell is auditing, and then you have the July financial statement, and because the county is on a cash basis, and we're on an accrual basis, the July one may not make a lot of sense, but the June 30th, which is the end of the year, is there, and Norm is here auditing it, and I don't know if you have any questions on that or not.
Any questions on the report?
Let's see, so I think I brought this up a little bit Did I interrupt?
Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. Was the line for, is it life insurance? What line was that? I lost it. It's on the white sheet.
It's under expenses. You got your,
It's
Yeah, so
422
management life insurance. Yeah, so just,
yes, you'd mentioned this just before the meeting, and
Yeah.
you said that it's not, we shouldn't have it anymore.
After-
We
after the
obviously
end
would
of
have had it
the-
in June,
right.
and possibly in July.
Mhm.
And if what you're saying is it would go away in August, but I talked to Clint a little bit, and there's a little question as to whether the interim manager has that, it's a county policy, is that right, Clint? That the manager has life insurance?
Management life insurance isn't just to your department head, it's to a classification of employees.
Okay,
And I believe Ted is covered whether he's program manager or acting or interim director, so you won't be charged if you don't have the person there, but that line item still exists, there will be something charged to it.
my confusion is I remember a meeting prior to the 10-person board where they specifically paid for life insurance for the director, which wasn't typical because,
It's
again,
above and beyond.
it was above and beyond,
Yeah.
and so I thought that this might be the same line, but obviously it's not. So I just was saying that that one should probably be taken out if it was for the director, so thank you for explaining that.
Which brings me to something that I was going to, after you're done with these questions, I might as well do it now. That's how the line of communications are now. We're all on the same page, working together, streamlining things. Norman's here, I was working with him today. Clint, I've been calling his office. Seems like I could call a different desk every day to get a piece of information. And I just want to assure you guys that there's been improvements made, and we're working on it. So, any other questions?
You know, it might be, just as a point of suggestion, because Ted has asked about it also, but the possibility of the recommendations from the forensic accountant that we had go through be relayed. Do you have a copy of that?
I glanced at it once. I wasn't
Okay.
sure whether I was supposed to or not, but
Those
Rich
were
did
cash-
show me.
Yeah, there were cash controls lacking, and that was a recommendation of Mr. Scanlon when he came through. So it would be things we want to institute now going forward, so there aren't issues popping up in the future. So,
Well, as it turns out, this is a perfect time to do it, because
Yeah.
our auditor's here, county, and we'll probably be working on that tomorrow.
okay, thanks.
Any other comment?
Since our auditor is here, when can we expect the audit? Is it December-ish?
Come on up.
Yeah, this is Norm Newell. Met him today for the first time after years, and we seem to be working well together.
Yeah, thank you. As soon as all the information is in, we'll be glad to issue it. We're working on the audit right now, doing the fieldwork portion of it. It usually takes about 60 days, 90 days to get an audit wound up. There's information that won't come in until about October. And to pull that in, you know, to go ahead of time, I would rather present a complete audit than have some parts out of it. So look somewhere in there.
Thank you.
Okay.
Well, Mr. Newell, while you're up there, it was a fair question posed earlier
What's that?
by one of the audience members, is just how in the previous audits this thing didn't come up with the missing money that was outstanding for more than 1 year.
That's what it appears, and I want to be careful in what I say, because it appears that we did discover it, and we brought it to Kevin's attention and recommended that he present that to the board, and because we were going to go ahead and put that in the report, but they were able to, it appears like, do it in small amounts and make it look like those receivables were good receivables, because they were depositing later, but not significantly later, more than 30 days. So you can kind of cover that up. It's kiting is what they're doing. And it's a tough one to find, but when I come in and did the audit this year, I looked at it and I was concerned that the district was not depositing timely, is where I started out. And then as this thing progressed, then I discovered that, no, there really wasn't money there. So at that point, I called Kevin in and we expanded on it, and that's when it came out. Yeah.
Mr. Newell did a surprise cash count yesterday, and from what I hear, it's going well.
Right. Yeah, we drove up especially Sunday to do a surprise cash count, because we wanted to see how things were working, knowing that over the weekend, there's lots of money coming in, and we wanted to catch these outlying facilities as well as the one inside, and are they depositing all that money intact? Various things have gone on. So, with that, we're not complete with that. We're probably finished tomorrow sometime.
Since we have the pleasure of having at least 3 professional accountants in the room, are you comfortable with the controls as they are today?
We were talking about today, we want to go over all the controls again, and put our heads together, if we can come up with some better controls, that's what we're going to do.
There's nothing absolute. You know, I do almost 100 special districts in 8 counties, and every year I have 2 or 3 that pop up with things. People have come up with ideas and they've gotten it out.
Make sure you share that forensic report.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you for being here.
Any other board comments on the treasurer's report? Yes, Mr.
You know, Mr. Newell, I'm going to bring this up in 5.2. You know, you don't have to come up now, because so many of these issues that we're hearing about are cross-collateral, they're cross-connected. And I don't want anybody in the audience, and Mrs. Henry, your comments were well noted, that what's driving every action that I'm doing on this board right now is the missing $27,000 plus. So every question I ask is, how can, we don't know, may never know the source of that loss, and if we do something, if we introduce a discussion item that appears to be punitive or perhaps overreactive, it's done with the idea that we do not know the answer to that question of where did the $27,000 plus go to. So I'll bring that up in 5.2, and I would appreciate your feedback there when we bring up some of these questions. Thank you.
Any public comment on the treasurer's report? Yes.
Elizabeth Henry, I didn't realize the auditor was here, and I apologize. No, I said what I said and I stand by it, but I just wondered when this was first noticed. Can the auditor, would it be okay, could you ask him that question?
Actually, that'd be the county auditor that caught it.
Oh, he did, okay,
Yeah.
not the...
Yeah.
Okay, and when was that?
Last October, wasn't it? Last July.
That's when it
Yeah.
was first noticed?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
All right, any other public comment on the treasurer's report? All right, we'll move on then to our discussion on action items. Item number 3.1 is discussion and possible action regarding the landfill inspection of 27th of August by Gina Morrison of the Regional Water Quality Control Board. Good.
Well, that just happened this morning, and everything seemed to be just fine. Of course, Hua and Brian were along with us as representatives of the County Department of Environmental Health, and they're also the local enforcement agents, just using an acronym, generally referred to as the LEA for CalRecycle. So they are essentially the eyes and ears of CalRecycle here in the county to make sure that we're following our requirements. And so when we have the Regional Water Quality Control Board and CalRecycle, the only thing we're missing is the Air Quality Management District, but that's everybody that looks over our shoulders in terms of those operations. And mostly they were interested in how the repairs were. As you may recall, we had some significant erosion damage over last winter, and those repairs are holding up fine. I did not hear any concerns that were raised that we weren't already responding to one way or another. We do have some additional grading to be done, and we have a part of the gas vent that was damaged at one point, and so I've already ordered parts to replace that. Wasn't aware of any other issue that was raised. Gentlemen? Nothing?
Good.
Okay.
Thank you. Any board comments on that?
No.
Any public comment on the landfill post-closure inspection? All right, seeing none, we'll move on to item number 4, which is collections franchise. Nothing on that? Number 5 is transfer station items. 5.1 is a discussion and possible action regarding a suggestion to eliminate all cash transactions at the transfer station. Mr. Gidlin, did you speak on that?
Yes, Chair Ania, I'm actually going to withdraw this request to discuss this item at this time. I think it's premature. I think that we need to have the discussion about cash, but I don't think now is the time to do it simply because we're in a period of reorganization. Again, as I said before, my concerns arise around what I'll call leaving cheese on the table. There's money there, and then it's not there. So I think what I'd like to do is hold off the discussion to a later meeting to address that issue, if it needs to be addressed at all. So with due respect, sir, I'd appreciate your taking that off at this time.
We'll do that. We'll withdraw that. We'll move on to item 5.2, and that's a discussion and possible action regarding a suggestion to eliminate checks for payment at the Del Norte County Transfer Station. Mr. Gidlin, you asked for this?
Yes, and I would like this, it's been brought to my attention that this should be a discussion. I'd like everyone to know that the genesis of this whole missing $27,000, this board was led astray under the guise of NSF checks. And a series of NSF checks which we were led to believe was accurate. It turns out that is not the case. And the NSF checks issue, if at all an issue, was not the source of the missing $27,000. So it begs the question is, and again, my question to put this on the agenda comes probably at the same time as Mr. Shadd's implementation of a new policy. So Mr. Shadd, if you wouldn't mind, can you come up here and explain that which you've already presented here, and to kind of assuage my concerns about NSF checks, if at all, do we even have the problem anymore?
Well, the problem with the NSF checks was being alleviated when Kevin introduced the idea of having more, I guess, a bigger safe cash on hand so that we were able to make deposits more timely. I think we did a study, or just a missed question of Ted the other day, how many NSF checks have they had recently? I think it was 1.
We have not had any NS checks since April.
Since April. So with more timely deposits, that issue's almost self-mitigating.
Right.
But what I did do is I set a new policy. Historically, when we had an NSF check, the authority would come in, take cash from a deposit, buy back the NSF check from the Treasury. So actually using hard cash, buy back the check to make the Treasury whole. What I've done is made a new process where there's no more cash changing hands. It's all going to be done through transfers with a paper trail in the accounting system to see that money going between departments as a transfer without having any actual hard cash go place to place, which I think is working out well so far. We haven't had any, so in theory it works out well. We're going to see how it turns out, and if it does work well, I might roll that out countywide.
Okay.
Chair Ania, can I just finish up a series of questions?
Sure.
Because
Go ahead.
Mr. Shadd and I had some discussions about what is the exact breakdown of the monies coming in to the transfer station. What percentage is coming in and what amounts? And we've been getting varying different amounts, but in the last 30-day period, I'm going to use your figures, Clint, is 74% have been paid by checks. Now, it seems like 3 out of every 4 transactions are checks, when in reality, you peel the onion back a little bit more, and in the case of 2 makers alone, dollar-wise at least, Recology, Hambro, a lot of that 74% is dissipated down to a smaller number. Cash is only 18% in the last 30 days, and credits is 8%.
Well,
Now, this is 30-day period. Is the dynamic changing?
it might be changing. You know, the number you requested was you requested out of the last 30 days, how much of the total was the percentage of checks, cash, and debit. Well, if we're looking at using Hambro, Recology in that overall number, well, they might write 1 check and it's going to be a big portion of it. Now, numbers of transactions might be much more difficult to get to. We can get it. And you might find that you have myself, for example, going in as a self-hauler with a $7 minimum fee to go through. You might have a whole bunch of those, and the actual total transactions might be, the percentage of transactions is going to be different than percentage of total.
The numbers are already here in the report. Basically, it says half the customers use cash, and then the second part of it says 10% of the customers use a check.
I haven't
Isn't that
seen
the
the report.
figures? No, I mean, it's in the,
That was based on gate receipts, yes.
yeah, and that's the number.
Okay, well, I don't-
Well, does that differ for your numbers you gave me, Clint, in the last 30 days? That's why I say, is this changing? Okay. And I appreciate the fact that we're having this discussion, and it's a good discussion to have exactly.
Well, is charges total vendors, are these paid charges or charges on the books?
These are paid.
Paid?
Yeah, this is our money coming in. There's cash from the gate.
Okay.
This is the checks are only 12,000 out of 58,000. Most people paying cash at this, but our vendor, I mean, the accounts
Well,
receivable
that's-
all comes in by check.
Well, that's where you're getting that big swing when I look at total percentage. So, I haven't seen this spreadsheet yet, so this is news to me. So I guess the question is, when you add in your vendors, which looks like it's $177,000, it skews that percentage quite a bit of total. Now, total transactions, as far as counting how many transactions you have, is going to be a little different than the number I provided. I provided just of the total amount received, how much of that total amount received was paid for by a check, paid for by cash, paid for by credit.
The last thing I would want to do as a commissioner is punish anybody for good behavior, whether it's writing checks or paying in cash or any other way. If you're doing a good job and you're not causing a problem, I'm not looking to be punitive on you, nor I think is this board. But I just want to see that with this new system you have implemented, that it seems to be we have a control now on the NSF issue.
Well, I can
That's
tell you
good
that,
news.
you know, the system's flawless. We haven't had NSF checks since April, I don't know, I mean, and paper, it looks great, but apparently what we have been doing as far as getting timely deposits and watching things, and what either college or Donut Solid Waste Management Authority has been doing, only one NSF check since April, I mean,
Yeah,
that's
excellent.
says a lot.
That's excellent.
I'd just like to clarify, Clint, is the procedure the one that was provided in connection with the director's report? It's called Solid Waste NSF
Yes.
Check Procedures? That reflects what we're doing, correct?
That's the new procedure.
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
I did have a question, though, on, are the gatekeepers keeping a list of names of people bouncing checks?
When there are people who bounce checks, those
Okay.
names go to
Because
the
I
gate.
would think that would be one of the things, if they bounce one check, then they're on the list, and we're not taking any more checks from
Right.
you. And that would be a good policy to have, of you bounce one check, that's it.
In
So,
place.
Yeah.
Any other board comments?
I saw in here that you take an open check signed and then allow the customer to come back and forth, and I thought that was very
I think
nice.
you've done,
Policy to have and very customer friendly. And I think that people would appreciate that, and I certainly think if 10%, it looks as without the private sector, 10% of people use checks. I think it's a good way to go. I think
Good.
it's working right now.
I'm glad it's working. Any other board comments? Any public comment on this item? Yes. Oops, go on up.
It's Andrea Wadsworth. I just wanted to elaborate a little bit on the open check. It is great for the community. They have multiple loads. They sometimes are doing construction or they're doing brush hauls, and they have a big project, and it really helps for the customer not to write checks and write checks and write checks. And I just want to say for the community, they absolutely love when they come in and they have to weigh. They don't know if it's $10, they don't know if it's $200. You don't know if it's raining, if it's wet. And when you have scales, you have to have 3 different denominations for that customer, because that customer brings normally 3 different denominations, card, cash, and checks, because they never know when you're on a scale. We can guide it, but we never know, if it's 100 pounds or 300. And then when the rain comes, they really do not know. And you know how much rain we get in Del Norte County. Sometimes they're like, whoa, it's not that much. Whoa, what? I said, well, was your lid off? I have to sometimes question, because we have to make sure that we're treating the customer right in every transaction.
It seems as if they, again, to me, it's a issue of trust, leaving an open check with an agency. So I
Well,
think that
and
demonstrates that, again,
With
the agency is trusted. I
average
think it's
of
a
200
good
people,
policy.
with an average of 200 people, they do like our service and they do trust us. I mean, there's a lot of people that are name-to-name basis there, and we get to know them and they get to know us. And it is a good service, and I highly recommend to keep all three denominations.
Thanks. Any other comments?
Just point of order, we don't have an action item on.
No, we're not going to do anything about it. Come on
Yeah,
up. We're leaving it the way it is. Come on up. Please state your name.
Karen Rath. I'm really grateful to hear Mr. Gitlin take the cash thing off the table for today. I think it's really important for the community and everybody here to have all three options. And if we were going to eliminate cash and checks, I think you'd be finding a lot more garbage dumped all over the county, because a lot of people here don't have credit cards or debit cards. And some of our elderly people, they're used to those checks. They like writing checks. And I'm glad to hear that the cash thing has been reconsidered.
Thanks.
Thank you.
All right.
Rich, just for the record, I know we pulled the first one, 5.1, regarding cash, but we had a discussion on the second one. Do we need to do anything other than have it die, or
It
do
was
we
a
vote
discussion.
against it?
It's a discussion only, item only, Commissioner Holly, and I felt it's a good, healthy discussion to have, and I'm so glad the public is weighing in on this. Again, I'm not prepared to make a motion on this to adopt the abolition of checks, because at this point, I wanted to do exactly what we're doing here, have a healthy discussion on it, bring the public in, and not punish people who are following our rules, get control of the problem. I'm seeing clearly that we are getting control of the problem, so we do not, and I keep coming back to this, we don't have a recurrence of a $27,000 minus figure or some figure into the future where we didn't dot our i's and cross our t's on that. That was the whole purpose of my wanting to bring it up to discuss.
So only one item got, 5.1 is the only one that got pulled?
They got pulled.
We didn't pull 5.2?
No, he just wanted discussion.
Oh, okay.
So the minutes will just reflect that
That
it
it without
died
a
for
discussion.
lack of a
Well,
motion?
then it was just a discussion,
Well, it says discussion and possible action.
possible action, so there was no action taken. So it's just a discussion. We'll move on to to the general solid waste authority matters. 6.1 is the discussion and possible action regarding Solid Waste Management Authority Resolution 2013-02, appointing a clerk of the board.
Move to approve.
Second?
It's been moved by Commissioner Sullivan and seconded by Commissioner Wilson to appoint a clerk of the board. And that clerk of the board is Mr. Holly right now, isn't it?
If this is adopted, it will be Mr. Holly.
All right. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? It passes. Do you need to poll the vote? Yeah. Go ahead.
I will. Commissioner Sullivan?
Yes.
Commissioner Holly?
Yes.
Commissioner Wilson?
Yes.
Mr. Gitlin?
Yes?
Chairman Ania?
Yes, thank you for that correction.
Thank you.
Item 6.2 is a discussion and possible action regarding a request from the Chamber of Commerce to waive the authority charges disposing dumpsters used during sea cruise, which is on October 12th this year. Mr. Ward, I believe we do this every year.
Yes, we do, and I'd recommend approval.
Is there a motion for approval?
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Mr. Gitlin, or Commissioner Gitlin, and seconded by Commissioner Sullivan. Should we pull the vote on this?
It's a money deal.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes?
Yes.
Yes, thank you. Now, 6.3 is a discussion and possible action regarding revising a job description and hiring a temporary refuse site attendant. Mr. Ward?
I mentioned this in the director's report. Essentially, the action we're looking for is to immediately begin the process to hire a temporary refuse site attendant and to concurrently, but on a different track, work to revise the job description, because that will take a little bit longer and there's no need to delay the hiring process for that.
Any board discussion on this item? Any public discussion on this item of hiring a temporary attendant? And we have budgeted money in the budget for this, yes.
I
All
would
right.
move to approve.
It's been moved.
I'd second that motion.
It's been moved and seconded for approval. Please pull the vote.
Holly?
Yes.
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 Yes, thank you. Item 6.4 is discussion and possible action regarding the electronic annual report for 2012 as submitted to the California Department of Resources Recycling and Recovery, called Cal Recycle.
So this is an annual report we have to submit regarding all of our recycling, composting, reuse, solid waste, facility siting programs, all under the framework of the California Integrated Waste Management Act of 1989. I'd like to thank Commissioner Wilson for coming and talking to me extensively about the contents of this report, as she was engaged with the task force, and so she has a good background in terms of knowing what these programs are all about, and ask some very good questions. So, but it does item by item describe a variety of things that we do, either in partnership with Recology, or implemented at the transfer station in partnership with Hambro Waste Solutions Group, or delegated through contracts. But it is a summary of the programs. I'd be happy to answer any questions. I guess one other thing I should add is that new to this report is I was asked by the Cal Recycle staff to include a description of how the county is complying with Cal Green, essentially the green building statutes that were adopted by the state legislature. We had worked, as an agency, Solid Waste Authority had worked with the County Community Development Department in the expansion of Walmart for their waste management plan. And I guess I had presumed that that same plan would be going into the Cal Green thing, but it turns out that the county is handing out a whole packet of information that I had not seen until I had talked to them about it. So essentially I took that information, scanned it, and included it with the report. But that's all the pages following page 14 of 14 where it says Ted Ward, and you see all those pages that follow. That's all just directly from the county building department as materials that they hand out to folks who are seeking to do new construction for residential properties to comply with the Cal Green statutes. So that was included, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Any board discussion? This is just a discussion item.
It is, unless the board has any further direction.
Did you have a comment?
Let's see, so a couple of things. We very thoroughly went over both last year's report as well as this year's report that's being submitted. And just to, the tonnage at the transfer station is up a bit over last year. And the amount, what would you call that is not diverted, but the compiled amount that is either diverted, it says, is down a bit, so about 10% or so.
There are a number of things that didn't make it into that report that also could change those numbers, so just something to be aware of.
Okay. So, and then the other thing is, and I was very concerned when I started reading the what the building department is asking the local builders to do. And again, this is not something that has come from the authority, but it is being passed out by the county, and particularly the construction waste management plan. And there's a lot of things in here that are very, very difficult for the builder. I don't know if you had a chance to read through here about they're asking waste prevention recycling materials and weekly meetings. They want to have over 50% of it recycled, and that they're asking the builder that if they are not able to use a hauling company who will be taking the material out, that they want the builder to go through and to measure each type of material and present a form on the different types of material that they're taking off of the building site and where it's going. So it's quite extensive. Again, you know, in looking at what Walmart had to do for construction and demolition, there's, you know, it's like 6-7 pages of things that are required in this little 2-page form that they all have to fill out. It's extra paperwork. What they're passing out now at the residential houses, this is, my dad is building a new home in the county, and so they just received this packet about 2 weeks ago, and what it talks about is that it has to be completed and signed, or they will not issue an occupancy permit. And gosh, this is for a residential home. They've got to fill out 8 pages, and it refers to, if there's bicycle parking, designated parking for fuel-efficient vehicles. It goes into...
That's all state law, though, right?
It is state law, though.
It's state law, it's not
Building
county.
21, it was a state law passed
State
2
law.
years ago. The
Yeah.
county,
Residential, though?
yes, you got to put a sprinkler system in your house, too. That's the state.
Bicycle parking
Yes.
designation at your
Yes.
home?
Yeah, it's the most ridiculous, it's a Southern California thing
Yep.
put in place for us.
They have in place here, within the first 6 feet of going into your home, you have to have a dust, resilient, what was it? You have to prove that you have eliminated the amount of dirt within the first 6 feet going into your home. It's got all kinds of requirements here that I really think, Mike, that this is meant for commercial.
Yeah, they passed it for residential.
No, it's best for residential also.
We've discussed
Like
that
we,
with
I
the city.
mean, Delaware County, we don't need a sprinkler system in the house.
No.
I mean, that's a fire suppression system, because we'll do more damage with that system than the fire will do. So the house is pretty much ruined once you turn that sprinkler system on inside. But it's stuff passed in Sacramento, intended for the Bay Area in Southern California, and it's state law. So Building 21, it's the most, I'll just keep my language clean.
Yes.
Because it's a cookie cutter thing that does not fit Delaware County, but it's state law. So,
Well, they will not issue an occupancy permit without complying with some of these. And again, these things need to be implemented when the plans are approved. It shouldn't be all these different agencies going through and adding more and more requirements.
I agree 100% with you.
Welcome to the world of overgovernment.
Yes, yes.
Well, anyway, so I have a big issue with Cal Green. Okay,
Thanks.
that's my point about this. It's
Okay.
ridiculous.
Any other board comments on this? Any public comment on this discussion? Okay, we'll move on to item 6.5, and that's the discussion and possible action regarding the approval of Del Norte Solid Waste Management Authority work plan for fiscal year 2013-2014. Mr. Ward?
So, under item 6.5, you'll see 8 pages of essentially contract requirements, regulatory requirements, directions from this board that are all compiled into a list of activities. So this is a fine chance to review those activities if there's any changes you want to make. I apologize for the confusing bit of the icons, but essentially I tried to make it as easy as possible to identify things that are either a lower priority activity or an activity that's been deferred. So if you just scan by and look for either the question marks or the little X's, you'll see things that are changing either because we are short-staffed or we're lacking capacity to complete those. We did try to select things that were not crushing urgencies. But for instance, it's not a surprise that when we're short-staffed, responding to public government agency and tribal requests for information reports might just take a little longer.
Yes.
For example.
You know, Ted, I had a couple of minor problems, at least one anyway, that under personnel and staffing, I understand updating the memorandum of understanding as needed could be deferred, but I think we don't have a choice but to adhere to the policies described in the MOU with the Solid Waste Management Authority. That can't be deferred.
Agreed, it can't be. But certainly, when we have a director that's been hired, then there will be more opportunities for further negotiations in that regard,
Exactly.
for example.
Thank you.
Any board comments on these pages?
No, I'm glad actually you got the question marks in there, because there are some things that in the past, there hasn't been a breakdown of what was a top priority. Like if one thing came up against the other, what one was going to win out. So I appreciate that some of these things are, you know, not quite as important as other ones, so I appreciate that.
Yes, thank you for doing that. I do too. I do too. Any other board comments on the work plan for this fiscal year?
So I will, unless there's more specific direction, because all of these things are essentially a compilation of the direction that we've already been given. If there's no changes, I will just consider this to be our work plan.
Okay.
So,
Did you have any comments?
I found the second one, and
Oh, good.
I just needed to ask about it. We have a question mark, so apparently we're deferring our procuring landfill insurance. And I don't want to bring that up if it's a sore subject, but at the same time, it's something that's been a high priority for this.
You know,
if it's a high priority, I can take that off. It's just
Take
we'll
the
have to
question
look
mark
at
Maybe-
other priorities.
Maybe Mr. Taylor can help with that.
Well, and I think one of the things that on the landfill insurance, I think it's just a question of contacting some brokers and getting some quotes. I mean, that's really,
My understanding from, again, cursory review is that the application process is pretty intense.
Yeah.
And,
Mr. Ward asked me about that, and I told him maybe that isn't a totally high priority, him doing the job by himself right now, because it is. It's not just calling.
it is a finding in the audit report though, and it's been that way for 3 or 4 years that we need to get some type of protection out there, so I would.
Okay.
And maybe, I would leave it in, take the question mark off, and it may not be something you address right now, but
It's
whoever's
part
in
of our
that
work plan.
potentially, we'll want to leave that as a priority
I agree.
item.
I agree.
I will remove that question mark, and that's exactly the kind of feedback I was hoping for.
And Ted, maybe it doesn't all fall on you. I know it feels like it does right now, but maybe Mr. Taylor could help with that, or you know, the business folks at the county level.
Okay.
Maybe they could be of some assistance.
Any other board comment on that, on the plan? Any public comment on the work? Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh, yeah, I spent quite a bit of time with Ted going over this as well this afternoon, and I felt that he did a real fair job in putting question marks on things that are really not a priority, and particularly any of the things really page 6, other than the one thing that Commissioner Hawley addressed on page 7, which was procuring landfill insurance. I don't feel that any of those things are a high priority at all. In fact, they're labeled priority discretionary activities. So some of them, I don't feel the need for, Del Norte County to be following through on particularly at this time. Also, I did get a chance to go through the 2011-2012 work plan that was put forward, and did some comparison on what was completed and what was not, and there were, again, a few things that were completed that it's kind of nice to see what was done previously in the last year, and then, what's working on. So they were able to get the household hazardous waste event completed. They did establish the carpet recycling pilot program, and that's now up and running. They did the street side recycling and trash containers. Those are all up and running. That was on their list from last year. They have submitted the gas generation study, and what has died away is the composting pilot with Hambros not handling what they used to. That's pretty much not moving forward at this point in time. And they completed the household hazardous waste element as well. So there was a lot of good work that was done this last year, and things that were completed. What I did for myself was, because there's 8 pages here, and I never know what's coming up down the road, and so I kind of just made a grid, which I do at my own business, of all the different months of the year, and then the days of the month, and then I went through to figure out how many reports are due on an annual basis, how many are due, I didn't do this, Ted helped me go through this, and how many are due semi-annually, and how many are done on a 5-year basis, because there's so many things. Sometimes I feel like I don't know what's coming our way. There seems like there's always something, and so was able to kind of lay out that there are 5 reports that are required annually. So we just went through the stormwater runoff for the transfer station and the landfill, and then also the annual report that the task force puts through. That one is done annually. The landfill post-closure report is done annually, and then they also give a report to the county in-house on what businesses have hazardous materials on site, so the fire marshal knows. So those are the 5 real reports that are done every year. There's one that's done on a semi-annual basis on groundwater, and then there's 3 reports that are due once every 5 years. So I know these seems like they come up again and again sometimes, but basically that's the gist of the reports, and I just kind of put it together in a way that made sense for me to look down the road so I can figure out, you know, what resources are needed. So that's kind of my report on going over all of their the work plan for the next year. Generally, I feel it's good. Like I said, from the discretionary items, I think he labeled as discretionary, all except for the insurance. I think that those don't need to be, he doesn't need to worry about those at this point in time.
Okay. You know, I think it's important to point out with the reports are due maybe once a year, but gathering the data takes place weekly or monthly, you know, to get the data necessary.
Some of them twice a year, they gather data.
Any other board comments? Public comment?
Sorry about that.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, my name is Bill Lonsdale, and I live in Crescent City, and I'd like to thank Commissioner Wilson for taking this the one step further that I was going to suggest, to step in the right direction. This overall work plan provides you with the basis for a matrix to determine what needs to be done and how often it needs to be done. And as Commissioner Hawley pointed out, some of the data gathering goes on all the time. But it is a workload analysis tool that your board can use to determine whether or not, to put it bluntly, the authority is necessary. One step that might be taken is to convert it to the matrix, similar to what Commissioner Wilson has done with the reports, and give Mr. Palazzo at the city and give Mr. Serena at the county a copy of it and say, okay, boys, what are you willing to sign up to if we dissolve the authority? And then we can get a better idea of where we might be going. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comment on this item?
Do we need a motion?
Okay. Do we need a motion for this, Mr. Ward?
No, like I will treat the guidance of removing that one question mark as consensus direction.
Okay. We'll move on to item 6.6, and this is discussion and possible action regarding the additional compensation.
Mr. Chair, I'm going to have to recuse myself due to business relationship with
Okay.
this one. So.
Additional compensation performed by our authority treasurer and controller, Mr. Richard Taylor. And so, Mr. Ward?
Mr. Taylor has been a tremendous asset during this period of choppy seas, and he's offered a bargain rate. Typically, it looks like CPAs who are consulting are charging around $240 an hour. Mr. Taylor generally gets $375 a month for doing what was a much more cursory job prior to this month. But this month he's definitely been spending the extra time and doing a good job of it, and I very much like approval of the board to compensate his additional work efforts, which I will work with him to try and make sure we're not spending hours we don't need to spend. But if I need financial assistance and oversight, he's my go-to guy, and I would very much like to have access to that.
Okay. Any board comment?
Yes, Chair, I do have a comment. Mr. Taylor, do you have a ceiling on how many additional hours you think you'll need? I anticipated we would be having this discussion, and I think your professional courtesy on the rate is very reasonable. But do we have what I'll call numerator-denominator ratio? Do you know how many hours more you need to work above and beyond what you're already doing? So we have basically a closed book on this?
Come on up here, please.
Very nervous about it.
I couldn't hear you, so we'll
And
start
Mike-
with
Mike,
something about a deer.
Oh, Ted was a little nervous about it. He was a little bit of deer in the headlights. And so I kind of stepped up And my plan was to go in and calm him down and say, no, see, Isabel does this and Lisa does this, we'll get this all done. And I did that, and I was going to donate that time. And then I see he puts in his report that I've accepted all financial responsibility as of, and then he hands me a packet that needs to be done the next week for the audit of 74 items. And we were talking about having a new interim director, and that didn't happen.
Yes.
So in answer to your question, I don't know how long before you get a director, before I can turn some of these duties over to the new director. But don't get too worried. I think I have about 13 hours in
Yeah.
before,
No,
before the audit thing started today. So it's not a big deal, but yeah, it's, everybody else is getting paid.
Plus, I think we're going to give you this life insurance to work out.
Yeah.
Or not life insurance, but landfill insurance.
That's exactly. So how can I
Landfill.
tell you until you tell me what I'm
Landfill
doing?
Do you need a sprinkler system for your house or anything?
No.
No, I don't think.
I have time. I'm not very valuable when it's not tax season. Come tax season, my time is worth some money.
Exactly, and I appreciate the fact that I don't think there's any abuse that's going to happen. I just kind of wanted to get an idea of what you had been doing, what is your load now, if you can kind of guesstimate how many more hours a week.
How about when it gets to 30 hours,
Okay.
I come back and I talk to the president,
Fair enough.
chairman.
So you're at 13 now, huh?
Yeah. Well, I had some today and I'll have some tomorrow.
Okay.
Thank you
And
so
one of the things we're going to be working on is we need to kind of go through our accounts receivable and write off some bad debts. So
Okay.
that'll take a little time.
Okay, thank you. Any other?
Thank you for all your help.
Any more board discussion?
I just like to say that I appreciate Rich stepping up, because this is a primary responsibility, as Mr. Gitlin mentioned earlier in the meeting. And we need to ensure the public that we're keeping a close eye on things, and I think Rich being over there does just that, so.
And we can see that by the timely deposits and only one bad check in the last 5 months. You can see that. Any public comment on this item, on the compensation? Seeing none, I'll bring it back to the board. Is there a motion?
Yes, Chair, and yeah, I'd like to make that motion to implement a compensation of $80 per hour for Mr. Richard Taylor, CPA, up to 30 hours a week, then come back and have a conversation. You leave that part off the motion.
No.
So I think if it's, the motion would be $80 per hour up to 30 hours, and that was my motion.
That's up to 30 hours total. Is there a second to that motion?
Just clarification, is that what you meant, 30 hours total?
Well, I think it's on a weekly basis. Is that what you were talking about? No, monthly? Then I'll stand corrected. All right, I heard week, and then, so from 13 to 30 hours per month. I'll make that motion, yes.
Is there a second?
I'll second that motion.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Clerk, would you please pull the vote? Excuse.
Yes.
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 Yes, thank you. Would you, Mr. Gitlin, would you get Mr. Sullivan? Thank you. Item 6.7, item 6.7 is the discussion and a possible action regarding the payment of the annual membership dues for the Environmental Services Joint Powers Authority of the Regional Council of Rural Counties for fiscal year 13-14 in the amount of $6,000. Mr. Ward?
This is a regular budgeted item. Essentially, the authority pays on behalf of the county for membership in the Regional Council of Rural Counties Environmental Services, JPA. It's a very useful discussion forum, particularly for pending legislation that affects rural areas, this Cal Green being a good example of a law that was passed that perhaps did not address issues as they're encountered in rural situations very well.
Yes.
But it is one of those things that I do recommend that we continue to do this, and this last month I got a big stack of advisement on pending legislation. Didn't have time to get to it, so in some ways that's kind of a lost opportunity, but it's just where we're at right now.
So this is included in our budget?
Is that,
It is included in our budget.
that's part of the $7,400 on memberships? In the budget?
I'd have to look which item it appears in, but it is a budgeted item. I wouldn't be surprised if that's where it was.
So this is just the discussion item, then. Is there any board comments?
Well,
This-
I feel it's extremely high, and I know personally for my business is that there are lots of trade organizations that I belong to, but I don't do it every year. Because of the expense of it, is that I will often, you know, take a break for a couple of years, or every other year, and then resume. $6,000, that's crazy. That is a huge amount of money for membership. $500 a month? Boy, you know, I personally would like to take a pass every other year and then catch up the following year. That's an extreme amount of money. We do not have someone at this point that is advocating, you know, or able to travel, and I feel that we should take a pass on it this year.
There are additional benefits even when we don't have time to actively participate because we have these established relationships. Larry Sweetser, for example, will advise us on pending legislation or regulations we might want to chime in on. And also, as part of the membership with the ESJPA, he has in the past come up and done specific trainings. As part of our training, I have to be a certified HAZWOPer, a hazardous waste worker. Essentially, you do a 40-hour training, and then you have to do an 8-hour refresher. The problem with that 8-hour refresher is it's generally offered by fire department personnel towards fire department and police department personnel, which doesn't have very much to do with operating a household hazardous waste facility. So it's really useful to have the site-specific training, and that's one of the kinds of things that this membership brings.
I'm sure it's nice to have. I'm just saying it's a very expensive, and that at this point in time, I just think that we could take a pass for the year. It's, you know, we don't have anybody at this point to take advantage of it. It also would require travel to go, and I just think that we're a small rural county, and that is a lot of money to be giving for membership fees for Del Norte County. You know,
So is that a motion?
How would you do a motion on that? Let's see. Is there any other discussion?
Well, you know,
Do I need to make a motion?
This is
I would make a motion that we would pass and not participate with the Environmental Service Joint Powers Authority Regional Council of Rural Counties for fiscal year 13-14. That's my motion.
And I will offer that second. I share your concern, Commissioner Wilson, on this. At this time, it's an expense, I think, with the authority in transition right now. I'm not seeing the benefit of this kind of expenditure.
And just as for discussion before we vote, is I see in here that the dues have been the same since 2005, and it's in our budget this year, but it's been moved and seconded. Any other discussion? Any public comment? Yes.
Elizabeth Henry again. I really hate to see Del Norte County moving away and isolating themselves from a lot of activity that happens at the state level. We may not be Southern California, but it's important that we stay up with what's happening, and I really think it's unfortunate if you're going to start withdrawing from membership organizations. The other thing would be, I would hope that you would delay this until next meeting so some of the public could study this item. I have no idea exactly what they do. We don't get a full packet, and I'd really like to have a chance to look at it, and I think other members of the public would also. I don't think since it's paid for this year in the budget, I don't think it's an emergency item, is it? And
I can give you, there's only 2 pages.
Okay.
So
Well,
you could read mine if you want.
yeah. Well, I would do some other research too. So anyway, that's just my concern. I don't think we should just be cutting ourselves off. It's kind of cutting off your nose to spite your face, so thank you.
Any other comments?
Maybe what we can do would be to table it at this point, and then actually contact this group through RCRC, which the county belongs to, which is important because it represents the 31 rural counties, But I'd like to have a better presentation on it than 2 pages as to why it would be worthwhile. The other thing right now is it seemed to be more worthwhile if there was an interim director in spot in the location more so than right now. Ted's acting in the acting director role, but that's just to keep things going. I wouldn't be opposed to pushing it off.
Yeah, they'll accept our money later.
Yeah.
So-
You know, if they're down the road when there's a time that, you know.
Yeah, and I've got to acknowledge that we have a lot of additional expenses right now due to some of the needs that we have. And it could be that the $6,000 could be spent differently, or not spent at all. But I'd like more time to maybe see what they have on a website and maybe get more detail about what they've provided us over the last couple of years or something, to see how many trainings have we available. I mean, when you hire a trainer from outside, it's usually like $2,000 a day. And if we're getting 5 days of training for our staff, then that's a very different matter. But I'm not seeing any of those kind of statistics, and I think that's what we'd like to see.
Are you willing to withdraw your motion so it can be
Or
tabled?
just table it.
Well, it's been moved and seconded
Oh.
to not pay it. Are you willing to withdraw your motion to have it tabled at this time? Pending further information?
In other words, we wouldn't vote on it,
We
we'd
wouldn't
push it
vote
off
on
to the
it
next
today. We
meeting.
would put it off to the next meeting.
With the idea that we'd get a report, preferably, as Ted can contact RCRC and say, can you give us a presentation on what this is all about? Because 2 pages is tough to make a decision on.
Yeah, I'm not saying that they're not worthwhile. I'm not saying that at all. I'm just saying that right now, I don't feel that, if we could take a pass every other year. I mean, I do that all the
understand.
time, and it just saves a lot of money. So,
So if there's no withdrawal of the motion, I'd like to make a substitute motion, and that is that we table this for a month so we can take a closer, more detailed look at it.
Is there a second to that?
I'll second that, and I'd like to give direction to staff to contact RCRC and put a presentation together on this thing, so we have some feedback on it. I mean, it's,
Okay, so the substitute motion is to table it for a month and get feedback from the RC staff. So that's the motion.
Well, Chair Ania, on the protocol, the second motion takes precedence. We're going to vote on that one first.
Yes, that's correct. So, Mrs. Phillips, would you please pull the vote on that, on the second motion, to table it?
I'm going to vote yes to table it.
no.
Yes.
yes.
Yes. So that motion passes, and it'll be tabled until next month, so we can get a
Now,
more detailed
Chair
report.
Nia,
Yes.
so I'm clear on, Commissioner Wilson's motion stays intact, and we don't have to reintroduce her motion.
She can reintroduce it next month, yes.
But we have it as a table now. It's already
It's tabled?
tabled. Her motion.
Mhm.
Well,
It is tabled.
the motion to table is her motion. So at,
No, the motion is not, no.
Okay,
There was a
what
sub-
happened-
There was a
what-
substitute
substitute
motion,
motion.
what we voted on.
Okay,
To
so-
table, we voted to table it. So next month, if you feel the same way, you could reintroduce the motion to not pay.
all right,
We're just delaying it a month.
Ms. Rice, is that correct?
Am I
Mary Wilson
correct?
would have to, Commissioner Wilson would have to reintroduce that motion?
Yes,
It'd have
that's
to be
correct.
reseconded, so it's essentially dead?
Yes,
It's
the
not being-
substitute motion took its place because it passed.
So it's not getting paid, but.
not
Yeah, the
paying
bottom
it.
line is the monies are being transacted. I'm comfortable
No,
with that.
no.
Okay.
We're just delaying the vote.
Okay, thank you for the clarification.
You're welcome. Okay, that was item 6.7. Our last item, 6.8, is our closed session, to go into closed session. So if there's do you have any further business, Mr. Ward? No further business, I'll adjourn the solid waste meeting for now. Thank you. Thank you for attending.